Hello everyone, and welcome to the Kings of War channel. Today, we're diving deep into the brutal, often fatal world of royal succession. We call this episode The Bloody Throne, for a reason. Throughout history, the path to power has been paved, not with gold and velvet, but with intrigue, betrayal, and bloodshed. Forget the fairy tales of noble princes and wise kings peacefully handing over their crowns. The reality was often a grim free-for-all, where sibling turned against sibling, and the only rule was to win or die. Let's start our journey in ancient Rome. The concept of a clear, hereditary succession wasn't always a given. When an emperor died, a power vacuum was created, and it was often filled by the strongest, most ruthless contender. Think of the year of the 4 emperors in 69 AD. After Nero's demise, 4 different men claimed the imperial title in a single year, each backed by their own legions: Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian. They didn't win their thrones through birthright. They won them on the battlefield, leaving a trail of civil war and chaos across the empire. This chaotic scramble for the ultimate prize became a recurring, bloody theme in Roman history, proving that the imperial purple was a dangerous color to wear. Now let's jump forward to the Ottoman Empire, which perfected the art of a bloody succession to a terrifying degree. For centuries, the Ottomans practiced a tradition known as fraternal strife. When a sultan died, all his sons were considered legitimate heirs to the throne. This wasn't a friendly competition, it was an all-out war. The sons would rush to the capital, rally their supporters, and fight until only one was left standing. The winner would then, by custom, execute all his remaining brothers, and sometimes even their young sons, to eliminate any future rivals. One of the most infamous examples is Sultan Mehmed III. Upon ascending the throne in 1595, he ordered the execution of his 19 brothers. Can you imagine? 19 of his own kin, some of them mere infants, were eliminated to secure his position. This brutal practice was later formalized into a law by Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople. He stated that whichever of his sons ascended the throne, it was acceptable for him to kill his brothers for the common good of the people, to prevent civil war. While it might sound barbaric to us from a purely pragmatic standpoint, it did prevent the empire from fracturing into multiple warring states. However, it came at an unimaginable human cost, turning the imperial family into a nest of vipers, where love and trust were luxuries no prince could afford. Let's shift our focus to medieval England, where the Wars of the Roses serve as a classic example of a bloody dynastic struggle. For 30 years, 2 rival branches of the Plantagenet royal family, the House of Lancaster, symbolized by the red rose, and the House of York, with the white rose, tore the country apart. The conflict wasn't just about who had the better claim to the throne. It was a brutal series of battles, assassinations, and executions that saw the crown change hands multiple times. Take the tragic story of the princes in the Tower. After King Edward IV of the House of York died, his 12-year-old son, Edward V, was the rightful heir. But the boy king and his younger brother, Richard, were placed in the Tower of London for safekeeping by their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Soon after, the 2 boys vanished without a trace. Their uncle then declared them illegitimate and had himself crowned as King Richard III. While we don't have definitive proof, the overwhelming consensus among historians is that Richard III had his young nephews murdered to secure his claim to the throne. This single act of ruthless ambition has become one of the most enduring mysteries and darkest tales in English history, perfectly encapsulating the brutal nature of the fight for the crown. The bloodshed wasn't limited to Europe and the Middle East. Let's travel to the Mughal Empire in India. The succession struggles here were just as fierce. When a Mughal emperor grew old or died, it was a signal for his sons to raise their armies and march against each other. The Emperor Shah Jahan, famous for building the Taj Mahal as a monument to his beloved wife, experienced this firsthand. In his later years, a brutal war of succession broke out among his 4 sons, Dara Shikoh, Shuja, Aurangzeb, and Murad. Shah Jahan favored his eldest and most liberal son, Dara Shikoh. However, it was his third son, the cunning, orthodox, and militarily brilliant Aurangzeb, who ultimately triumphed. In a series of ruthless campaigns, Aurangzeb defeated all of his brothers. He had Darashikoh publicly humiliated and executed, and his other two brothers were hunted down and killed. But Aurangzeb's final act was perhaps the most poignant. He imprisoned his own father, Shah Jahan, in the Agra fort for the last 8 years of his life. From his window, the old emperor could only gaze at the Taj Mahal, the symbol of his love and power, now a reminder of all he had lost to his own son's ambition. These bloody successions had profound impacts that went far beyond the royal family. They often led to prolonged periods of civil war, instability, and economic ruin. The constant infighting drained state resources, weakened armies, and left kingdoms vulnerable to external threats. The Wars of the Roses, for example, decimated the English nobility and allowed for the rise of a new dynasty, the Tudors. In the Ottoman Empire, the practice of executing all royal brothers was eventually replaced by confining them to a part of the palace known as the cafés, or the cage. While this was more humane, it had its own disastrous consequences. Princes would spend decades in isolation with no training in governance or military affairs. When one of them was suddenly called upon to rule, they were often incompetent, paranoid, or mentally unstable, contributing to the long decline of the empire. In Russia, the period after the death of Ivan the Terrible was known as the Time of Troubles. His successor was feeble, and after his death, the dynasty ended. This created a power vacuum that led to a decade and a half of chaos, civil war, foreign invasion, and a parade of pretenders claiming to be Ivan's youngest son, Dmitry, who had died years earlier. The country was brought to its knees, and it took the election of a new dynasty, the Romanovs, to finally restore order. The fight for the bloody throne had nearly destroyed the entire nation. So why did this happen over and over again? The answer lies in the immense power and wealth that came with wearing a crown. A king or emperor held the power of life and death, commanded vast armies, and controlled the destiny of millions. For ambitious individuals, the allure of that ultimate prize was simply too great to resist, outweighing any bonds of family or morality. The system itself, often lacking clear and unbreakable rules of succession, invited conflict. When the law is ambiguous, the sword often becomes the final arbiter. From the legions of Rome to the janissaries of the Ottoman Empire, from the knights of England to the armies of the Mughal princes, the story is remarkably similar. The throne was not just a seat of power, it was a symbol of survival. In this deadly game, there was no second place. You either sat on the throne, or you ended up in a grave. The history of royal succession is a stark and bloody reminder that the quest for absolute power is often the most dangerous game of all. Thanks for joining us on this journey through some of history's most brutal power struggles. What do you think? Was this ruthless system a necessary evil to prevent wider chaos, or was it simply a product of unchecked ambition? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories from Kings of War. We'll see you next time.